Hello and welcome. I hope and I pray that your summer is going well. It's been really warm here in the Pacific Northwest. We've had the longest string of warm days, 90 degrees and plus, which is really warm for us. The longest string we've had in over 100 years. It's always interesting because people ask, it's never been like this ever before. Actually, we find that throughout history, there's kind of a cycle of weather. In fact, the term I think they use is climate change, that the climate does change on a regular basis. And we're going through a really warm time. So I hope you have air conditioning or someplace where you can get cool, maybe some water you can dip into. But we're continuing back to the point of our discussion, we're continuing in our look at the letter of James as he talks about the practical aspects of living out the Christian life. We refer to it as kind of the book of Proverbs of the New Testament, which, by the way, one of the great exercises that I've enjoyed over the years is reading through the book of Proverbs cover to cover. In fact, there was been a couple of periods in my life, like 6 months at a time, where I almost read Proverbs exclusively because there's no way to totally absorb everything's there. But I find that whether you read it once a day, you can go through it a chapter at a time, or you can read large sections and read it over and over again, as I have done as well. There's something about these teachings that just kind of begin to stick in your brain and reprogram how you look at life and how you think about things. It begins its stated objective is to bring you to a place of wisdom in your life. So, and that's really the same thing that James does. It's just in a much more compact package. In fact, where we are is we're in chapter 5. We're getting fairly near to the close of this book, but we're going to look at verses 7 through 11. And I want to begin by reading those verses first, and then we'll be picking them apart, basically breaking them down as we go on through or as the term is often used, we'll unpack them through the rest of the week. But in verse 7 of James 5, he begins by saying, "Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patiently he waits for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." Now, he begins by saying to us, remember, and what we need to remember is that James actually started this letter by talking about the same topic, the same issue of patience. Remember in verse 3 of chapter 1, he says, "Knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete and lacking nothing." In a way, we might say that great things always take time. And that's kind of a difficult thing for us today because we are pretty much a very impatient people. We're not that aware of how impatient we are because we rarely have to wait for anything for any extended period of time. So we pretty much expect things are going to happen rather quickly, and if they don't, we want somebody to pay a consequence for making us wait for something that we think we should have today. I often think about how that during COVID, we became so accustomed to ordering things online that we've kind of really gone to that more and more with our life. We don't do a lot of in-store shopping like we used to. But the thing is, I'm amazed at some things that will get there the next day. And then when something doesn't, I really begin to get impatient. Well, that's been 5 days since I ordered that and it's not here yet. So what you realize is that your idea of patience is shaped powerfully by whatever is your contemporary experience. I just remember when I was a kid and we'd order something on the Sears Roebuck catalog, and we would wait many weeks, sometimes months, for the thing that we had ordered to be delivered. We had no expectation of it coming any faster. And so this is where the patience issue is largely affected by what our expectation is. So that if you want a definition of patience, I guess one of the ones that I could give, maybe it's more of an equation of patience, that patience is faith plus time equals patience. And so faith means I'm trusting in God. Patience means I'm waiting for what I'm trusting him to do, so that becomes not only my faith, but it becomes my hope. And that patience and hope are two things that grow together. In the end, what that creates in me is not only getting what I want, but something that's more precious to God. And that's the development of a heart of patience within us. So that we might sit back and say, well, why doesn't God just give things to me that I want or need? Why does he make me patiently wait for things? There's an important development of character that takes place that's often unforeseen when we have to wait in patience. And what it is, it creates a trust in God that produces a willingness to wait for God, so that what we get in the end is what God wants, not just something that we want. In other words, what God deals with in my patience is my own willfulness. I want my kingdom to come, and I want it to come quickly. And patience is the thing that teaches me, or at least the obstacle of patience that requires patience, teaches me that I have to surrender myself to God's timing, ultimately to what God's will is in my life. Now, the importance of patience is really illustrated by the passage that we just read in James, because we find that 6 times in only 5 verses, he uses the word patience, or a synonym that's in the Greek as well in English, that really describes how we're supposed to respond to difficult times. For example, in verse 7 he says, be patient. The word means patiently waiting, a steadfastness, a constancy, enduring. In other words, I hold my ground, I don't run fast. In fact, in verse 8, he says, be patient and stand firm. So here it is, that self-control that doesn't give in to the impulse, and what I would say is often a childish impulse to want what I want right now, and I want it in its fullness. Well, it avoids the premature force of retribution, or taking care of a situation, settling it on my own terms and in my own time. That really basically, it keeps us from what might be an improper reaction, even anger. That sometimes when things go wrong and things are delayed, we can become very angry. If you've ever sat at the airport and had your flight delayed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. One time it happened to my wife and I in Israel, and I thought that passengers were going to riot. But anyway, we were forced to wait 12 hours to catch the next flight, and it was a really pretty unfortunate thing. But the point is, I saw people just going, as the Jews would say, verklempt, and it was not pretty. So we need to be patient, we mean steadfast, but we also need to be firm and not giving place to wild, rampant emotional outbursts or efforts to try to fix what we can't fix by our own force. And then in verse 10, he has a third way of putting it. He says, patience in the face of suffering. And this is really another degree of difficult patience, where the person is actually suffering, but their suffering isn't in vain. They're patiently waiting for something, or not reacting, because they want to see Christ glorified in the situation. They're waiting for God to fix the situation. And that's where that becomes a sacrifice pleasing to God. So there are so many spiritual dimensions to the idea of patience that it's not surprising that it's really one of the major themes of the New Testament, and one that we can learn a great deal from. So I pray that you'll be patient with me as we bring this to an end today, and pick it up tomorrow, because there's so very much that we have to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it. So many blessings, and go in his grace.